Since the beginning of time, mankind has been compelled to create. They are driven to build, tinker, and craft. It's something that makes us distinctly human, and with the growth of modern technology and the birth of the internet, innovation has never been so accessible and within our grasp, allowing us to learn about the natural world, and most importantly, ourselves. Join the Honey Badgers as we discuss the Maker Movement. As always, the show will be available for download after the broadcast at honeybadgerbrigade.com. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We got a wonderful show for you. Today's show is we're going to be discussing the Maker Movement. So I'm going to read the article. Oh gosh, I'm going to butcher this name because it's like really weird. Feminist engineer Debbie Chatra takes issue with the term maker and maker culture. She seems to believe that making things and being a maker has historically been an act which is predominantly male and dominated by men. Yeah, never mind all the things created by female artisans in the ancient world. Yeah, let's ignore all that because Debbie has a problem with a merit-based system to which she likely contributes nothing. While the spirit of the Maker Movement is often to empower people to try new projects and do things themselves, all Debbie can think about is how it might devalue her. Throughout her article, she blasts the movement because she seems to feel that her position as a teacher is worthless in a movement based in creation. What she seems to be suggesting beyond that is far worse. She feels that a creation-based movement, which places value on those who create, devalues women as a whole. However, last time I checked, a good portion of the movement was based in arts and crafts and DIYers, which are well populated by women. Tech aside, those women sew, sculpt, build, cook, and forge new things. This is not something new to the Maker Movement, and to ignore this is to ignore a history of female blacksmiths, artisans, painters, and more. What seems to be the problem is not the Maker Movement, but the feminist problem with meritocracy. There's an attitude within the Maker Movement of learning while doing, making anyone a potential educator of sorts. Perhaps it is this that she really takes issue with, as she drones on about her lack of importance in a creation-driven community. Because in such a community, she is not the center of the universe. She is a mere educator among educators, and a creator among creators, unlike feminism, which values women for the mere virtue of breathing. The Maker Movement values people who strive to actually produce something tangible. In this moronic diatribe about how making is a predominantly male task, she devalues female textile makers, cooks, potters, and farmers. To her, all women have done for centuries is sit on their asses and care for children. To her, they were not valuable members of society who made utilitarian items important to everyday life. Nope, they were just useless people in the background that did nothing, all because it makes her uncomfortable to know that she doesn't make anything.
She makes wine.
Yeah, she does. She does. Oh,
Sherry, did you want?
I did. It's not only is she ignoring what women have done in the past, but she very clearly does not watch TED Talks or know anything about what is currently going on in the world. Not to mention the Arduino makers in South America that are, like 11, 12-year-old girls, and a variety of other African girls who have invented who have made and invented things. There's also, for instance, in India, they have a barefoot college where women are in charge of waterproofing the roofs. That is their technology that they refuse to share with the men. It is kind of a cute little thing that they're doing. They're like, this is our technology. We invented it, and you guys you can't know what it is. It's our thing. And on top of that, from Barefoot College in India itself, they have spread out to Sierra Leone and Afghanistan, where they teach grandmothers to make solar-powered lamps. And for instance, in some of those areas, only women are being able to be taught in a certain way, because men sometimes, especially when they're overly masculine in a certain way, they do have kind of a more rigid, unlearning kind of a brought up by Bunker Roy in this TED Talk, who's the organizer and the creator of Barefoot College, that they actually specifically go and teach grandmothers, because women are very easily pick up these technologies. Or in the Barefoot College itself, there's a group of women that are engineers in a certain way. They are illiterate. They do not have any formal education, but they have made a solar-powered cooker. So there's a variety of women that make things that make solar power that have brought light to their villages in Afghanistan and other places, and yet all of that is somehow ignored by this author. So it's very glaringly and grossly a lack of a worldview and knowledge about anything that's going on in the world with actual women.
Now the thing is, when feminists come into a community, and this is the same as when they come into the gamer community, when they come into the rest of the geek community, when they've come into any other area that they want to label a predominantly male space, that means that they have to ignore the women that were there before them. They cannot acknowledge that there are women who exist in those spaces and who interact and respond and participate and so on in a manner that does not fit the feminist narrative. Because if they acknowledge that, then their narrative dies. They can't go in there and complain that women are excluded because there's already women there. And they can't go in and complain that it's not a female-friendly space because those women are thriving in it. So instead, they have to come up with reasons to exclude women from those spaces. And they have to come up with their reasons to exclude women from the discussion. And when it really, what it really boils down to is that with respect to any space like this, probably the most female excluding group in the space is feminists.
Yeah. Well, when I suggested the tagline that's in the ad for this video, I was actually being very tongue-in-cheek. So I suggested that it would be Lillian, who's Vivian's cousin, insisting that she deserves a robot because Vivian has maker privilege, because she got off her ass and used the parts around her to create something. And because she now has something, she's been privileged to have it, rather than it being a natural extension of her own abilities and desire and dedication and discipline. It's privilege. And that justifies why Lillian gets to have one too. I thought that was actually hyperbole on my part. I thought it was just sort of a funny hyperbole, because when you do drawings, you have to slightly strawman things. And then I read some feminist writing on the maker community, and this particular article that Rachel is talking about, and I realized it is not hyperbole. Literally, these women think that the ability to make something is privilege, but it's not privilege. It's not. It is simply the ability to sit down and be disciplined and learn something and do it. And that's it. I mean, and what they're saying by saying that is some sort of male privilege to be a maker is they are actually saying that women are not capable of taking on that role of learning and doing. And this struck me when I read a feminist who said that the maker community is not inclusive because the maker community has technologies that have a steep learning curve, and the inclusive technologies are technologies with a low learning curve. So if your technology doesn't have a low learning curve, it's not inclusive to women and minorities. And you know what? I'm going to just drop minorities from this because that is so racist to say that minorities need technology with a low learning curve, that I'm just going to deal with them saying that women need technology with a low learning curve and just not deal with that other part of it. That's what they're saying. And I'm reading this, and it's so funny because Hannah was also reading some of these articles with me, and she described them as word salad. And then I went and I described them as, I don't know if many people have ever eaten that KD, Canada's Treat, Kraft Dinner. If you make Kraft Dinner and you don't stir it properly, what you end up with is this really bland mush of squishy noodles and bland cheese. And then you have these occasional super concentrated nuggets of radioactive orange cheese bits. And if you get one of those in your mouth, it's this intense explosion that's so offensive that it makes you want to puke. And this is what it's like to read feminist articles on the maker community, or in fact the gamer community. Any community that's merit-based, that's a meritocracy, they're incredibly bland, and you don't know what the fuck they're getting at, and then they have these moments of sheer offensive, concentrated bullshit that it's like just slaps you in the face. And this was one of those moments for me when she said, women need, it's not inclusive, it is sexist for a community to have technologies and not inclusive for a community to have technologies with a high learning curve. Because women need technologies with a low learning curve in order to be included in a community. And I'm like, lady, your inferiority complex does not speak to me, for me, to me, or for me as a woman. Because what you have just said is that women are too stupid or too lazy to actually learn these things. And you know, and I don't know if this was a different feminist author, but I read, or the same one, because they all blur into a mishmash of endless bullshit in my mind. But another, or it might have been the same one, also decried the male creator. A man created a platform with a low learning curve. So he actually engaged with technologies with a high learning curve and repurposed those technologies into a completely new platform with a lower learning curve. And this particular feminist, because he got the accolades for doing that, and not the women, and again, they lump in the minorities, not the women and minorities who then took the platform and made stuff with it. So even when men create technologies with that low learning curve, they're still bad because they get credit for it.
You have feminists arguing every day that women do equal work but then get paid less. And here you have feminists arguing that women can't do equal work. I gotta repeat that. Feminists arguing that women can't do equal work. And they're using it as an excuse to demand concessions. And yet, they argue that women get paid less money for the same work. If women can't do equal work, it's not the same work. This is the level of stupidity that runs through the feminist movement. They honestly don't expect people to recognize that they are arguing one thing when they want one result and the opposite when they want a different result. And to get those things, they're willing to step on the women who are more capable than themselves.
Well, we threaten the victim narrative. That's the simple thing.
It's like they act like what women have been doing for, I don't know, like centuries isn't making or creating. I mean, it not only insults women of today and even minorities of today, it insults just, is there a single part of this that isn't offensive to like everybody? It's just, God, it's ridiculous. And, you know, I've been a part of, I've at least been following Instructables since I was about 19 years old. And, you know, that's one of these kinds of websites where they'll post up tutorials on how to create different things. And it's everything from, I think, minor robotics to learning how to make a sweater. And it's really, really great stuff. And how somebody could take, you know, empowering yourself to create things that you want when you feel that you previously could not, it is in any way a bad thing. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, the other thing I wanted to bring in about the community is there is something very positive about it being a meritocracy. And it's hard to imagine why you would want to go into such a community and start throwing your weight around about it not being inclusive when the only thing stopping you from creating is simply your desire to act, your desire to affect change in the world around you. But what I wanted to bring out is, but Allison,
but Allison, don't you know the feminists think that meritocracy is a fallacy because women and people of color are oppressed, and therefore what's really happening is that really they're just being ignored and oppressed, and that's why they're not getting ahead, and not because there are specific people who are lazy and don't speak for all of everybody, of women and people of color.
Well, here's what I don't get. It's like they're saying that women and minorities are marginalized from educational opportunities. But here is an educational opportunity. Here is an opportunity to engage with the technology and learn how it works. And they're saying that because, even though they have every single possible avenue of having access to this technology, exactly the same as a white straight het man, or a white straight cis man. They have exactly the same avenue as access to the technology as these men, as a man. They simply can't do it. Some invisible force is keeping them from learning because it has a high learning curve, even though they have exactly the same access, and the only thing that's stopping them. And you know what? I would almost agree with them if they would start taking this conception to its logical conclusion. Maybe there is some sort of force, some sort of portion of their identity that's preventing them from being able to access technologies with a high learning curve, even though every other aspect of that technology is now accessible for them, except the time and dedication to learn it. Maybe that invisible hand that's holding them back is their very victim identity. But if they actually reduced it down, I could almost support them in that, and also support them in liquidating it. But they don't. But what I wanted to get down to is something a little more positive, because the maker community, with its emphasis on meritocracy and making these things accessible to people, but also this emphasis on people cooperating, working together, and teaching each other. I mean, it's a better way of men and women coming together and actually working together cooperatively, and to highlight that I think is a good thing. So I think somebody mentioned that in our mailbag, just to talk about how men and women related to each other in a positive way, because we talk about a lot about how men and women relate to each other in negative ways, and a lot about feminism, which is generally negative, period. But to see men and women creating together is a good thing. And helping each other create.
Actually, one thing I wanted to say on that, when I didn't realize there was a community. This is just something that my family has done. If we wanted something and we couldn't go out and buy it, we learned how to do it or make it or whatever. If it involves a craft, you learn that craft. If it involves something else, anything that you can make at home. But there are maker fairs all over. I don't know. I'm sure they're all over Canada. I'm sure there's maker fairs in Europe. I know there's maker fairs all over the United States, because when I first started looking this up to read about it, that's the first thing that I found was pages on various maker fairs. There's one in Cincinnati that the next time it comes up, I'm probably going to. I won't have to drag my husband down there. He'll be interested in it as well. But to go see that, and I think honestly, with the way the men's rights community is, it probably would be something that would interest quite a number of our listeners. And so, I'd recommend looking it up, because there's probably one near where you live. There are so many of them that there's, and I'm not just talking about, there's crafter fairs too, which are similar, but not quite as all-encompassing as maker fairs. So I say look it up, because there's probably one close enough for you to visit it.
Mm-hmm. And I think men in particular, and I wish this was true about women too, because I think that they would probably be a lot less inclined to embrace the victim identity presented by feminism. But men in particular seem to do really well when they have something to do.
Actually, in that case, take your daughter with you.
Yeah, take your daughter with you.
I have to say that. You know, I got to go off on this. My father taught me to do this. This is not something. I mean, it's not that my mom didn't. She talked about it less. She just did stuff. She didn't talk about it as much. My dad is more of a passing things on to the kid by making sure the kid gets it, and by discussing it with the kid in addition to doing with the kid. And as far as making things is concerned, you know, he went into more artistic stuff. He's the stuff that he does. He's a photographer. He's a professional photographer in addition to being a retired school teacher and a whole lot of other things. And photography was not something that, you know, he didn't go to school for 4 years to learn to become a photographer. His degree is in education. And photography was something that he learned by reading about it and doing it. Took his camera out. There were days when I rode my bike back and forth past him 50 times to get different ways of capturing motion. And then he'd process the film and show me the pictures and explain to me what he did. Put a camera in my hands when I was 2 years old and started teaching me photography. And teaching me not just the art and craft and science of photography, but how to learn on my own how to do things. And so, you know, when I started wanting things that I didn't necessarily want to go shell out $50 for a hand crocheted hair scrunchie, for instance, I learned how to make them on my own in the same way that he did, because that is what I was taught. So it's not something that girls just naturally shy away from. It's something that I think that we don't think girls are going to want as a society, and so we don't give them the same lessons of, you know, learn how to seek that information and make practical use of it, and test yourself and build knowledge within yourself. And it's something that as parents we should be teaching our children of both sexes. It's probably the most important lesson that you can give your kids outside of your lessons on ethics and morals, is teaching them how to teach themselves how to do things and make things and find things.
The reality is, and I'm going to say that, the reality is this: girls will never be able to climb steep learning curves if they are not criticized more and praised less, significantly less. None of this because you're a girl shit. Because any girl who's listening to this, you can't do anything because you're a girl, except menstruate, squat out a baby, and receive a penis. That's it. That's all you can do because you are a girl. But you can do things because you're a human being. And if you are a hard worker, you can achieve. But it's not because you're a girl. It has nothing to do with you being a girl. Nothing. Being a girl gives you no advantage. Okay, go ahead, Sage.
Well, on the note of criticism and praise, I think that I think it's just I sense I ducked out for a little bit. So one of you already probably said this, but there is something to be said about high expectations. If the bar of expectations being low is what I think is just important to note here. I don't see it so much as about criticism or praise so much as it is about having something above you that you want to reach. And if you had and having the motivation to get there without having that need for validation the entire way through. I've told the fucking story of the Freeside Atlanta stuff way too many times, so I'm not going to tell it again. But I would like to mention in the a story I mentioned before about Georgia State University and the R programming language, where again women were given cookies for showing up, and men were given consolation prizes for participation. Like that was pretty much the language of the ad, and creating this environment where in essence you have to bribe somebody in order to be part of this. It creates that. I don't know. It's condescending for one thing. It's fucking condescending as all get the fuck out. But no one is ever really setting those high expectations anymore. Now I'm reading this book by Robert Heinlein. Friday, somebody requested that I read it for my channel, and it was interesting because it's about a female and artificial person who has superhuman abilities and who is one of those characters that can pretty much solve all of her problems by doing some crazy acrobatic feat. But the thing about it was she had a kind of father figure who was just called Boss throughout the entire thing, right? And Boss always was very curt and assertive and even arrogant, but he always thought highly of Friday, and whenever he wanted her to get better, he never gave her undeserved rewards. He never really rewarded her much at all, really, but he always had a lot of faith in her and always would say, "This is what I know you can do. Now, are you going to do it, or are you just going to sit there and just live in self-pity and all that?" So it was actually a great message, I think, relevant to what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, it is a great message, because that's what criticism does. Criticism says you can be better, you can do better. It doesn't reward minimal effort, it rewards maximal effort.
Constructive.
Well, yeah, constructive criticism. Well, I don't even know if there's a type of criticism that isn't constructive. That would be just insults.
There is. The way I've looked at it is, if somebody were to criticize you but they don't actually care about helping you, they just want to look smart, then yeah, I don't consider that constructive. I just consider that being a dick.
Criticism is fault finding. If you are fault finding and there is a fault, then it is helpful for the person if the person is able to ignore whatever shit it's packed in and just take here's the fault and I can fix that out of it, which is what I did eventually after being a girl about it for about 3 weeks.
Okay, then I misspoke then, because I'm under the impression that there are people who do insult and call it criticism.
Well, there's one of the biggest differences between criticism and insults, and I think maybe this will clarify the argument, is criticism is directed at what you do. Insults tend to be directed at who you are and things that you cannot change. I, with a deeper instinct, choose a man who compels my strength, who makes enormous demands on me, who does not doubt my courage or my toughness, who does not believe me naive or innocent, who has the courage to treat me like a woman, Anais Nin. In this case, the courage to demand the absolute an absolute respect for his vulnerabilities, the courage to demand that I live up to a moral standard. That's what the men's rights movement does. It does not give me an identity of victimhood, but demands that I live up to a moral standard. And for me, I like that, because I find that to be, what's the word, empowering. Okay, let's move on.
Wait, I want to say one thing really briefly, and it has to do with what I kind of wrote about this, because it's something that we talked about when I was writing it, as far as identifying when feminists are doing this to a community. And what I wrote was, what I could get from the articles could be summed up in a few sentences. Those sentences describe not just what they did here, but what they'd always do. So what you want to watch for in your specific hobby community or your professional community, you watch for groups of people who claim to speak on behalf of women, who reserve the right to presume that their sensibilities are common to all women, to presume that experiences they claim to have are common to all women, who claim those experiences include behavior from men which they deem inappropriate, who refuse to acknowledge that such behavior ever originates from anyone except for men, and who think that women should be uniquely exempt from that behavior. And then therefore, everywhere they go, they think that rules need to be made to force all of the men to accommodate their sensibilities. That is the formula. That's what they do. And they will speak over the women that are already in the community to enforce that. Because, like I said before, those women can't exist in conjunction with their narrative. That's basically it. That's what you watch for. If feminists are coming in to take over your community, that's what you'll see happening.
And I wanted to add something because they were mentioning, it's hard to parent a daughter because you don't want her to suffer. Well, sure, that's fine, but just recognize that what you're parenting isn't a kid, but a useless bag of protoplasm. Because if you don't give a girl the skills she needs to overcome high learning curves, you are essentially turning her into somebody who might as well not exist at all. You just might as well throw her in the trash heap, because what will she achieve? Nothing. She won't become a fully fledged human being. She'll just be somebody who grows up and says things like, well, low learning, I need something that has a low learning curve, or it's not inclusive. I need men to lift me up, or it's not equal. And Jesus Christ, we don't need more women like that.
If you enjoyed the contents of this podcast, please consider supporting our show. You can become our patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. This show is made possible by the contributions of listeners such as yourself. Thank you for your donation.